All right. Well, let's talk about organizing data. Oftentimes, when we're using these AI products, there's a lot of data that gets generated, a lot of documents that get generated, a lot of information that gets generated. Some of these tools, like for example, ChatGPT and Anthropic, their Claude models, and even Gemini has some organization stuff. They've kind of come out with this concept of like projects. And so projects can be a really great way for you to organize this information. And so I'll go ahead and create a project here, and we can call this project, dashboards. I think I might already have this project in here from previous. And then I can add specific instructions. So I could give it some idea about, well, what are we working on here? What is like the core concepts or core ideas that, we want to talk about? And this can be an easy way for us to kind of preemptively prompt stuff. For another example, there is, let's see, we have ChatGPT projects where we can add files, specific instructions similar to the Claude instructions. And these instructions, it gives you an example, use we're trying to build this type of thing. We're trying to use these types of frameworks or data, or this is the type of company. You can kind of think of it as like kind of creating your own little bill better sometimes, where you're giving it its own instructions. You're kind of giving it its own content. And you can even upload specific things. You could add a specific text document. So let's say, here's how my writing style, or here's my intent, or here's how I want to construct certain things, or just upload a document straight to the tool itself. So there's a lot of kind of benefits of using this. And when we talked a lot about prompting, this is where that kind of organization of, keeping those prompts in one place, how you write a specific document, how you do a specific thing, you can kind of keep those as instruction sets or their own documents themselves for the AI to use. So for example, if we wanted to, we could say, this project is about creating a dashboard for users. We are using Next.js. We have paying customers. We want to, so you can, add on up, you can just keep going on this, and you can generally, like, more instructions, the better. I wouldn't say there's a bad way of doing this other than try not to do prompt engineering. These aren't in pretend like you're a user researcher type stuff. This is more of like, what are you working on? Why are you working on it? Who are you working on it for? What type of information might you pass down to someone if you were to give them this project? Like, hey, make sure you use this, or you don't use this, or, don't include this, and that kind of stuff. And the ChatGPT one is fairly similar. You can give it instructions, you can upload files, and the good and the bad is oftentimes they're doing embeddings and vector searches. And we talked a little bit about that when we talked about signals, but there's pros and cons to this. And the cons is that if you upload too much data, it has a really hard time getting specific answers. So it might struggle if you uploaded, let's say, a whole PDF, like a whole book, and you wanted to ask a question about it. It might really struggle at understanding when to use that, if to use that. And even if you selected it for use, it might say, okay, well, I can only really embed 1 page or 10 pages or 20 pages or something like that. So it's important to kind of keep in mind the use cases here. And of course, most of these tend to be shareable projects. A lot of these companies are trying to build out like these business GPT type experiences where you can upload a lot of data and have access. But it doesn't seem today that these projects can access other projects' data. So do be mindful about when you do add something to a specific project, you have your own copy of that, or you might want to create another project with that data. And that can cause a lot of problems and a lot of conflict if the data gets stuck in here. As you start creating data, there are often ways for us to kind of, generate a PRD in Canvas, and I can kind of use that. And then as more information gets added to here, I can kind of pull that information in. Looks like it's generating a PRD in text itself. Let's do this one. So here we go. So we can kind of do this, and they're always adding features. I'm sure they'll add a lot more abilities to be able to save this information and use it and be able to address it. You can see, like, I can't really call a specific document or file in this project, although I'm sure that as you add more data, it will definitely use that information, but it's a little bit sporadic. So it might not always use specific information. It might use some of it. And then of course you have other types of projects. So for example, when we're creating these dashboards, you're able to organize these into their own kind of areas as well. So as we start creating more UI components, more things, we might create a separate project. So for example, for dashboards here, we can add all of the different types of dashboards that we want to create, organize that into its own project and then share that with the team. We can dive into here, and we've added this now to the dashboards, but let's kind of go in here and you'll see I've added a lot of different information here. Same thing, same set of instructions. I can add my own sources. I can even add a GitHub repo and stuff like that. So each one of these products often have their own way of doing projects. Perplexity does, they do pages as well as, what do they call their specific thing? Spaces. They have spaces. So you can kind of create a spaces. I love organizing my research by specific spaces. And so I might say, okay, here's parables. And then I might create a new thread. Okay, here's parables from China. Here's parables from India. Here's parables from the Western world. And then I can kind of create and organize that into one place. It doesn't, for example, in Perplexity, you don't have a way of like asking questions over all of the threads. And you can't really kind of export this or extract this to any place, but you can share these and have contributors and stuff like that. So there are these limitations, and these systems don't really work that well together. You're kind of limited. Okay, now I have this PRD. How do I save this PRD? How do I get this PRD back into the project? How do I talk with a new PRD? And I would, in theory, I'd have to copy and paste this out, save this as a text document, and then upload that back to the chat itself. Now, maybe it would know to embed the chat, but again, you're kind of at the whims of AI deciding or figuring stuff out. There are other ways of organizing information. So for example, in Build Better, you can create folders and you can drag calls, or you can even find specific signals from those calls. So let's say like, I want to look at all customer feedback that talk about dashboards or whatever it might be. And over the last 6 months, and then I want to save that. I want to select all of these and I want to add that to, our dashboards folder. And then when you go to these folders, let's say go to the integrations one, I can go ask a question to all of that data. And I can even create a document based off of that folder. So I can say, okay, go and I want you to create a use case document based off of the documents folder or the dashboards folder or whatever it might be. So there are a lot of ways for us to think about organizing our data and our information into specific silos. One of the recommendations we often give customers is, let's say if I were to, let's look at a call with Tyler and myself. And obviously I can look by a specific tag. Let's go to our product sync where we go over kind of product reviews and stuff like that. And I might want to add a tag here. And then later on, I can filter by this tag. I could create insights from this tag. I could filter by saying, okay, show me all user research calls that talk about these 5 things. And I can even use that in chat, where I could even ask a question saying, find all calls related to, hashtag, whatever tag I want, user research. You do have to spell it correctly, and whatever it might be. So you can kind of use that organization, those tags, those folders, to then organize that bucket of things, whether it's signals, whether it's calls, and then use that in chat where you want to reference it. You can use that in folders where you might want to talk to that collection of data. I personally really love doing this stuff when it comes to like internal meetings as well, where I'm trying to find that we talked about a specific tool or a specific idea or specific problem, so that I can go back a year from now and be able to say, hey, why did we make this decision? Why did we come to this conclusion? What customers were asking for this now that we've released it? Let's go back to them. Let's follow up with them. We see a lot of product operations teams organize things by tools. So as you onboard a new person into the company, you might say, okay, I need you to go learn how to use this tool, but you've already created all these sessions and calls with them. So why go generate that again? Why not just create a folder where you've had those recordings, send them the folder, and then let them ask questions. Let them ask what they might consider a stupid question. But you might not. And now they have the ability of asking those questions and ramping up those people much faster and easier. So those are kind of like high levels. Each one of these tools have different ways of organizing your data. I do think the best way is to usually not use one of the default tools, because as your organization grows, that information just gets lost. The projects that you create inside of these consumer chat tools often don't scale up. So it's really hard to share that information. It's really hard to get that information to the rest of the organization, even if you're on kind of a team plan. Having something similar to like a Build Better, where you're able to organize the data, and then you're able to talk and select what data you want to have a conversation with. You're able to have permissions on that data, make sure certain people don't get access to things that they shouldn't. So for example here, this is a signal from a customer who's asking for the Gong integration, and I can go and search for that, but I could also just go straight to that call and then listen to the customer talk about that specific thing. I could also add that call to a specific folder, download it, share it, duplicate it, but I can also make this call private if I don't want anyone else to have access to this data, or I can label the call differently or add a specific tag to it. And these are just kind of what we mean by it's important to kind of think about where you're saving this data, where you're putting this data so that you can use it again in the future. So if you wanted to upload a specific file, you might want to organize that file into a folder, and then you might want to organize more things into that folder, and then you might want to have a chat with that. You might want to share that folder with someone else so that they can have a chat with it. So it's important to kind of think about how you start organizing this data, because a lot of these tools, a lot of these LLM tools, they do have some basic stuff like projects and this kind of concept of adding files, but it can get quite cumbersome quite quickly. Not to say that they aren't making improvements. They made dramatic improvements over the last year, but I think you'll find that there are a lot of changes and improvements that are coming to individual tools focused on specific problems, but make sure you do kind of save this information in some way or another. Hopefully that helps with kind of tagging, labeling, and organizing, and I'll see you on the next video.